So Becky asked me to maybe talk a little bit about, I'm an entrepreneur like my perception is most of you, kind of fell into it completely by accident. I was a poli-sci major, philosophy minor, headed to law school, and this is dating myself, but a long time ago, took the LSAT, got ready to roll, and had a really bad constitutional law class. I don't know if anybody ever stomached any of these things, but if you think about the attention span you had in college, mine was maybe 45 minutes, or those twice a week classes were maybe an hour and 15 minutes, and that's about all I had. This was 3 hours once a week, Wednesday evenings, which was brutal. And then you had to write 6, 8, 10 briefs. And if you have never been exposed to this, you read a really dry, very mundane case, and then you write about that very dry, very mundane case. And I woke up one day and said, is this really what I want to do for the rest of my life? And ended up sort of falling backwards into this business that 23 years later I now own. And all we do is teach people, usually they're companies, usually they're the individuals who are out there selling or managing, but just overcome a lot of the frustrations that people run into when it comes to selling and managing salespeople. So I can pretty much talk for the 30 minutes, bore you all to tears. I've got some information I could show you. I'd love to, if I could, maybe help you if you've got certain things in your entrepreneurial journey that are struggles on the sales or sales management side. But Becky said, maybe share some things that you think are substantive. And as I've been exposed to a lot of different speakers, a lot of different entrepreneurs, a lot of groups that I participate in, I feel like there's 4 big maybe subject matter blocks that I'd want to own if I were starting a business today. Obviously, the bias I have towards sales would be one, but sales and marketing, which are really 2 different things. 2 is people, hiring the right people, training them, onboarding them, getting them in the right place. 3 would be finance and really understanding that. That was something coming out of school as I started to run a small business. I had no earthly idea what I was doing, and luckily I've had some good mentors in my life and people helped me there. And then finally, just strategy. Where are we going long term? How are we going to grow this? Is it scalable? What's our delivery channel? Those types of things. So I find mentorship that I mentioned being extremely valuable for me. Going out and reading as much as I can, although I'm not one of those voracious readers. I'm jealous of people who can grab a book and in a day or 2 just finish it up. But I'm constantly trying to learn new things and incorporate them in my business and my management style and what I do. And then I find this might be a little odd thinking about entrepreneurial journey and growing, but I've gotten a lot of value out of getting involved with groups, nonprofits, or giving back and trying to share some of the stuff. And somebody says to me once, you're my mentor, and I kind of laugh and said, you should upgrade the quality of your search because I don't think I'm really capable of doing that. But it's amazing how much we can get, at least in my experience, from involving ourselves with other younger entrepreneurs and trying to share some of the experience that we've all had and the growth that we've had and the mistakes that we've made. So that's kind of my maybe 30-second soundbite on my 23-year venture into this whole thing. So like I said, I have some material to share with you if you'd rather. If anybody has anything, like I said, going to market, sales related, closing, managing or motivating salespeople, hiring salespeople, I'd love to talk to you about any of those topics if anybody has them. Becky didn't tell me whether or not you guys actually talk, so this could crash and burn very quickly, but this is what I do all the day, so I'm okay with that.
Crash and burn?
Generally, yeah. Anybody? Sir? So, not knowing everything about everybody in the room, just to share a little bit, we have a very small organization. I've been as big as 9 people. I have found over the years that my voice, and I try very hard not to dominate, especially a conversation about strategy or where we're going. I've had employees over those years that have stepped up, that have helped, but usually engaging somebody outside the organization is very helpful. I was turned on, I joined an organization called the Entrepreneur's Organization. It's a global organization, probably 13 years ago. The first speaker I saw was a gentleman named Vern Harnish. He's got a book out called Mastering the Rockefeller Habits. Anybody, you're shaking your head. Do you remember the latest? What's his new book? I'm blanking. It's a really basic, really simplistic, get it all on one page, have everybody in the organization understand where we're going and what we're trying to accomplish, and kind of simplify it. When you think about the concept of a business plan, I was teaching the second week last night of a 6-week series, And I've got a young man who's got a ton of energy. He's just starting this thing up. He literally works at the Cleveland Clinic. He's doing this on the side. And you can just see him exude this passion. And he said, I need to have a strategy. I need to have a plan. I need to have something that's bankable. Do you know people? And so the one piece I'd say is find an outside resource. Sometimes it's as simple as reading a book like Vern Harnish. If anybody's been exposed to Traction or the EOS model, it's very, very similar. There's a bunch of implementers. Gazelles is Vern Harnish's company. There are people out there who do that. Another good resource, in my opinion, is this EOS, which is the Traction model. Same thing. Make it simple. Communicate it with everybody on the team. I see value in finding outside resources. And go and hire somebody who has some expertise, maybe spend some money. It's another interesting one. I've had clients have a ton of success grabbing grad students from local schools and have them come in and do projects on their company. So on the forefront, it looks like, hey, we're doing a nice thing for Baldwin Wallace or whatever university it might be. I mean, here we sit at Lorain Community College that they may have the same sort of resources. But the benefit that you get when you get 3, 4, 5 of these, not always young, because there's all kinds of different people going through a master's program, jumping in, pulling apart your business, giving you input, I've seen some real value in that experience. So those are just a couple thoughts I have just from a strategy perspective. And probably the other thing would be, just like goals, strategy ought to be living, breathing, constantly evolving. We're looking at it with regularity. And I think we can probably kill people with way too many meetings. So the concept of sort of dashboarding, really simplistic. Where I've seen it work well is we're having very brief conversations. This morning we had what we have 4 days a week. It's a 5-minute meeting. Red, yellow, green. Is it working? Is it not? Where do we need help? And then we just keep moving rather than droning on like I am right now. So I'm going to stop talking. Hope that helps a little bit. Sure. Anybody else? Any thoughts, questions? Yes. Yeah. So I would say, again, this is going to sound very biased towards what I do for a living, and that's not the intent. But each and every one of us are constantly out there selling, whether we want to be or not. We're selling ourselves to potential customers, in the financial planning world, because that's a conceptual service. Probably fundamentally, we all know we need it, but it's you or how many other people in the marketplace could I pick from? Several. So really, I'm buying you. And I'll show you a model. We believe, and a brand new client last night shared this perfectly, in my opinion. Pretty experienced guy, been in industrial sales. He's a manager, pretty high level, VP of sales for this company. He was just acquired by one of my companies. And he said, the number one problem I see is people go out there and they try and fill this space with information about themselves. Traditionally, from a sales perspective, that's product, service. That's what I can do for you. So what we want to be careful of, if we can, is when we're out there trying to sell ourselves, this is a little odd, but I think we met because I spoke to a group here of people that are looking for work. And I said the same thing. Do the best you can to go in and ask the hiring manager, the owner, whoever it is that you're interacting with, what are the gaps right now that you have in your company? What are the holes that you need filled? Why do you have this position open? If you can get them talking about that, you kind of turn the table a little bit. Most people are spending too much time trying to sell themselves. This is going to sound fairly crass, but nobody cares about us. They care about themselves. So if we can get them talking about them, so from a sales perspective, simplistically going back to, I want to save for my 3 kids' college because it would break my heart because they're all so far doing very, very well in school. So if my sophomore says, Dad, great news, I got into Princeton, and I go, sorry, pal, there's no money for that, good luck, I would not feel great about that. So that's a pain point in my brain. 2, my wife and I both work. We have a nice lifestyle, but we'd like to be able to stop working at some point. Maybe I have no earthly idea when that's going to happen or how I'm going to make that happen. From a sales perspective, those are some simplistic examples. If you're looking at people that maybe to fund you, maybe people to bring on board, they're probably, it's an interesting segue, but I think it's related. I was a judge for a global competition, an organization I'm involved with it's called the Global Student Entrepreneur Awards. So, by the way, this is a little self-serving for those, we hold them every year. There's a local winner here in Cleveland who goes on to nationals, and it literally ends with global. And we have thousands of student entrepreneurs, people who are still actively engaged in school, but they've started businesses. And a big part of the judging criteria, purposefully, is on the person themselves. Not the business necessarily, or how quickly it can scale, or how they're going to distribute their product or service, or how different the product service even is. 70% of the scoring is about the individual. How resilient are they? How open are they to learning lessons? How do they handle bad situations or things that don't work out the way they want to? Why? Because that person, even if this particular business doesn't fly and explode, they're going to have the right kind of makeup to be somebody who you'd like to see successful or maybe even invest in. So, for sure, at your stage, what kind of business is it? I think having great ideas for you at this point would be really, really helpful. If you put all the stock and all the conversation is about that idea, and then somebody beats you to the market. This gentleman last night who's got this startup says nobody else does it. I went home. It's just an interesting, different kind of a business. I was sharing it with my wife. I did a Google search. And a big piece of this is driving people to his YouTube channel, where he's got about 14,000 people following him. Unfortunately, when I did a Google search, there's another gentleman doing something very, very similar who's got 1.6 million people following him. So unfortunately, this young man might have all the passion in the world, might be the right guy, but if all he's talking about is this concept, a potential investor takes a look and goes, oh, there's somebody out there who's already beaten you to the market. You're a non-factor. So I think completely selling yourself, your ability, your passion, the things that you bring to the table, having some ancillary ideas or products that you're bringing along with you are helpful. But I think people who, by and large, are going to invest, it depends on the people that you're talking to. But I think selling yourself, your commitment, and what you're able to do is going to be really helpful. Okay? Yes? So, one, I want to make him aware, because this just happened last night. Class finished about 8. He hung around until about 8:45. Went home at 9:30, 10 o'clock. I'm sitting on the couch talking to my wife about this, so just experienced it. So I'd reach out to him and say, hey, I don't know if you've seen this, but I did a Google search last night to try and find some more of your videos. This is what I found. Are you aware of this? So it's okay if there's somebody else in the marketplace who does the same thing that you do, if there's some differentiator. Because if we don't, and that's a piece of what I'll share with you, if we don't differentiate ourselves, at the end of the day, it's all about price. So we've got to have something that we're doing differently. We've got a rule: if your competition is doing it, stop doing it right away. And again, that doesn't mean you shouldn't do financial planning, but there should be a component of it that helps you be different. You yourself, I think, could be one of those components, but if there's something else. So if he doesn't have a way to strategically differentiate himself from that, and that person's that much further along, maybe that's really going to limit his marketplace. What he's looking for really is somebody to sponsor him to make a bunch of these videos. I'm old enough now that I had to be honest with him. I said, I'm not sure I 100% understand how that is a business that you can monetize, but yeah, I think especially early on, the more people that you get that challenge, don't tell you you're not going to be successful, but give you good constructive criticism on your concepts and your ideas, the better. Because I think a lot of times when we're working on our own businesses, it's kind of like that, if you ever wrote a paper and you went back and edited it and edited it and edited it, it's pretty soon, it reads the way your brain thinks it does. And you might actually be changing things. So there's blind spots that we all have. So I think getting outside input on what's going on is always very important. Yeah. I'm mentoring a young man right now through this GSEA competition who's in Manila in the Philippines. And he went ahead and told me, he and a bunch of other kids that are about to graduate from college seem like brilliant young people. And what they're doing is attempting to find a hand cleaner that can get, so people do it yourself. Apparently a lot of people in the Philippines work on their cars. So that would be a market. Or other people that are maybe doing gardening. There's products out there, but his belief was the price point for US-based products was maybe $20 for one of these applications. He'd never seen them. He'd never actually touched them, but that was his belief system. I went to a conference he was going to be in halfway around the world. I said, tell me what the products are, I'll pick them up. When I got there and handed them to him, I said, this one was $3. This one was $5.75. The most expensive was $7. So if the big differentiator he thought was going to be our products were $20 and his product was going to be $2 or $3, they're closer than you think. So I think probably a lot of times we look around in our limited world and we think we've got all the answers when in fact there may be some more things out there. And Google really enables us to get those answers pretty quickly if we do a little bit of research. So any other questions? Okay, so I'm going to fly a couple things, and I want to get to the end very quickly. And most of you as entrepreneurs or business owners, I don't think you firsthand have this. You have the advantage of being a business owner. But the model here is if we were to ask general people out there what sales, play the password game, try and guess salesperson, you'd hear a bunch of things that probably aren't very flattering. Used car, fast talking, lying, cheating, stealing. That's the belief system, I think, of the general marketplace. So when you're out there in front of potential customers, the inference is, so one, that's their thought, and then two, how many of those words actually describe any of you? In our limited interaction this morning, I don't see anybody who's a shyster or makes me uncomfortable or makes me feel like I shouldn't trust them. But the problem is humanity has been burned before. So whether I'm sitting with you thinking about your new business or I'm talking to you about financial planning or insurance, I have all this negative experience in the background. So the thought here is just, one, to understand the mindset of the people that we're talking to, and two, in my humble opinion, do everything you possibly can to never sound like a salesperson. Because there's a stigma. I was planning on being an attorney. I don't know which one of those two might fight for. Is there somebody with, like, in a class that's salesperson, attorney, what else do you have? Like, what's that? Banker. Banker, IRS agent, something. So my clients look at me kind of funny, and maybe I should have been an English major rather than a poli-sci major, but hey, I'm just touching base or wanted to follow up. If I could just get 5 minutes of your time. There's nothing wrong with any of those phrases at the core, other than they've been used so much that I think people start going to this sort of password salesperson when they hear those words. The second premise here is, which one would you guess? Who's a salesperson in this silly cartoon and who's a prospect? Person on the left is salesperson. Everybody guesses that. How do you know? I wish the guy on the right would have, rather than a pinstripe suit, would maybe have like a pair of khakis and a golf shirt, because I think that it was just, finish it out perfectly. But he's carrying something. When we walk in with stuff, it's strangely intimidating. I try and get my clients to walk in with a legal pad and a pen, with nothing. Because if I walk in with a bunch of stuff, I think the prospect instantly goes, oh boy, here they are, they're gonna try and close me. And probably they're thinking, we assume already you know what I need. I know it's insurance, or I know it's financial help, and probably it's gonna be the same thing you've done for 15, 20 other people, but in that first interaction, if I leave the briefcase, or I leave the samples, or I leave all the other stuff, at least in the car, or thrown under the table as soon as I arrive, I think there's a little bit of help there. What else makes you think that the guy on the left is a salesperson? Hey, how you doing? Good to see you. Radio voice, the big cheesy smile. I think generically they're telling us to be upbeat, positive. Nobody wants to interact with somebody who goes, oh, life stinks, this is awful. But you ever been having a bad day and suddenly you're interacting with somebody who seems like they're like the greatest thing going? How do you feel? Things were bad, you meet them, they're making you feel better or worse? Strangely, when we're having bad days, go ahead. I don't want to undo, if this is years of therapy and in motion trying to help somebody feel better, that's fine, and I'm not poking fun at any of that. I mean, sometimes some people need to have that sort of positive energy, but that guy's going, hey, good to see you, how you doing? And they're going, whoa. And I think their body language says what? Scared, nervous, I've been taken advantage of before. Other people have said, trust me, I'll take care of it, it'll all work out. So again, this skepticism, that divide, the nervous, anxious, concerned people we go out and interact with, that's all emotion. So traditionally, I think we've tried to fill that void with intellect, with features and benefits, with white papers. Today it's websites or it's blogging. Whatever it is we're doing, and putting content out there that's helpful, I think is great. But at the end of the day, the way to narrow this anxiety crevasse, this emotional divide between us and our potential customers, is to get them telling us what's wrong with their life right now. We call that pain. If somebody doesn't have a problem, take insurance. I've got business insurance, personal insurance, I've got life insurance, I've got disability, I've got all these things. If you and I meet and you go, hey Keith, what do you think? I got a bunch of great stuff. I probably go, I'm fine. Now, if I'd have had a claim 6 weeks ago that's supposed to be covered, they denied it, now I've got an attorney fighting with them, and it cost me $30,000 and probably another $20,000 or $30,000 in legal fees, hoping they actually do what they said they were going to do, totally different conversation. Or I haven't heard from my agent in 5 years. That's probably the number one pain in your world, just neglect. I'll take care of you, I promise, and then you never see him again. So we want to start getting people talking. Again, it works well for them because they like to talk about themselves. If you can understand conceptually what the key strategic drivers are for you, your business, your product, or your service, and then ask questions of your prospective customers so they start talking about what they don't have, now we've actually got them starting to narrow that naturally. You'll do it too with bonding, but sometimes in the world we live in today, things move so fast. You know, some of my clients are working on deals. I had one today, architecture firm, working on a huge national account. Been working on them for a year and a half. Just had a conversation, sounds like they're going up there next week, finalize the deal, they got it. Hooray. Year and a half. You know, the number of times that story ends with, oh, we were about to sign it and Mike got promoted, or Mike took another job, or Mike was unfortunately laid off, downsized. So I think for most of my clients, if we can focus on getting people to tell us what's wrong right now, they're naturally feeling good about you if you're listening. I'm not doing a great job of that this morning. We think there's two key systems at play in the market when we go out and talk about our products or our services. The first one is the prospect system. So step number one, and I hope not to offend anybody this morning, and I'm going a little quickly, but the first thing that people do when they encounter a salesperson, we believe, is lie. If you don't like the word lie, we can insert mislead just as effectively. I'll give you a couple of examples. Any of you walk into a retail store and an associate comes up and says those scary words, "May I help you?" What comes out of your mouth before you even realize it happened?
Just looking.
Yep, just looking. Why do we say that?
Get them off our back.
Get them off our back.
We don't want to be sold.
We don't want to be sold anything. It's a nice, easy pushback that gets people. Anybody else? I did the pattern response. I'm walking into one of those retail stores. I want something. I'm starting a 10-hour drive, which we're going to do the same one this Friday. And this is a dated story, but I needed to get, I think it was something I plugged into an old iPod that then had a radio frequency, and I could tie it into the car and listen to music on the way there. And she says, "Just looking." And before I could turn around to go, "Well, actually, I do want," I said, "Just looking," to her, "May I help you?" And then I spent the next 10 minutes searching for this thing, which, I mean, it's not even in our best interest all the time. Sometimes the more frustrating version of the lie is, "Thanks so much for calling," or "Yeah, I would like to meet with you," or "I want to go ahead and have a conversation." And then if we're not careful, if prospects are asking us questions, which feels great because a lot of times prospects don't talk to us at all or they don't want to engage with us, if prospects start saying, "Well, Keith, tell me about your classes, and what do you teach, and how much is it, and how long do we spend," and all these different things, I can start to feel like I've got a really good interaction going, and I'm talking. You can tell I talk way too much. And I'm feeling like I got a live prospect. Depending on what you're out there doing with your business, you may just be educating them enough to take that information back to somebody else, or to do it themselves, or to leverage Google again and go buy this product for little or nothing. And the optimist says they ask about the price point at this point because they want to see if they can afford it. The pessimist, in my experience, says all they're doing with that price that you give them is going back to their current supplier and trying to beat them up. They don't have a whole lot of intent on doing that. Some of you are shaking your heads, I should say. So far it's going pretty well for the prospect. So at this point, they very rarely say, "Keith, thanks for your time, but I never want to talk to you again." So we think they might mislead or even lie to us again. And sometimes it's, "I'll let you know," or "Give me a couple weeks." Sometimes they make up this elaborate, "I've got a partner down in Florida. I hadn't told you about it before. He's a silent partner, but I got to run it by him before we spend the money. Give me a couple weeks," or "Send me an email," or "Do this or do that." And sometimes we end up selling them when they're in control. Sometimes we end up at step number 4 where they don't answer and they don't return our calls. So does that look vaguely familiar to anybody? That wasn't intended to make anybody feel bad. Everybody shakes their head and goes, "Yeah, that's exactly it." So the basics, and this isn't sales pitch, this is me trying to help as much as possible. We think number 1 is pain. And that's a word you're hearing more and more out there in the marketplace, but that's what I just described with that anxiety crevasse. If there's nothing wrong with their life right now, all things being equal, they don't need to necessarily engage you for your products or your services. So if we want to turn that conversation around, rather than going in and telling them all about you, your products, or your services, ask them questions in an effort to pull out what, if any, pains they may have. Just as a quick example, I gave a couple there. Anybody have a business where they're sitting there going, I have no earthly idea what sort of pain I fix? Anybody have a real world example we could kind of quickly model to try and find the unknown? Everybody's okay with that conceptually? All right. Second thing we would do, and out of last night's class, just a fresh lesson from one of my brand new customers. He said, I went in, I asked a bunch of questions, they talked. It seemed like I had them, really emotional. You probably have to go back to these issues 3 or 4 times in the conversation. Maybe in the flow conversation right out of the gate, maybe as they bounce around to different topics, just really drilling down. I think that's unnatural for most of us. Most of us don't like getting people upset or frustrated or angry. We like to solve the problem. But if we don't really get them emotional, so as an example, let's just say my accountant filed an extension this year for me, and I didn't like that. If the end of that comment is this person I'm talking to who happens to be an accountant says, well, can I give you a proposal for us doing the work? It's really premature. Do you feel that? Yeah, I'm a little bit annoyed because I don't like filing extensions. I've never done it before. That makes me feel like, I don't know why, but I feel like I'm going to get audited if I file an extension. Some of you might laugh at me. My father always said, you always file an extension. You never get audited. And I thought, I don't know anything about the IRS, but if I'm an IRS agent, I'm chasing the people who don't file on time, not the people who, so simplistic thought. But I just need to get them talking about more. So tell me some more about that, or how long is that going on? Or when you told them you were frustrated, what did they say? If I keep talking, it might go, I'm scared to death I'm going to get audited. That really makes me mad. I think I'm ready to change accountants in this made-up example. So get some depth to that conversation if you can. Step 2, we write money, and the word budget might make sense. Most of us are probably not crazy comfortable talking about money. If we're owning small businesses, the better we get at that, the easier life is going to be. You know, growing up as children, probably if you ever asked somebody how much something costs, your parents said, hey, you don't do that, or that's rude, or stop it. We have to kind of unload that. I think it's probably weird in a social environment for any of us. You know, we were talking before about your wife and what she had done before, and then you just mentioned if she did something similar here, the way the market is, significantly less. If I'd have said, oh, that's how much she'd make here, what was she making before, you probably would have looked at me like, going, that's just weird. But when it comes to things like the products and services that we sell, it ought to be a very comfortable, very normal conversation. So I want them to tell me, once they're emotional, how much they're looking to spend. And it may be, here's what I've spent for all my policies over the past couple years. It may be, here's some target pricing for these products or services. But if you can hold tight on that and get them to tell you, that's really ideal. Step 3, it says decision. Really understand all the components of the decision-making process. So who's involved? When are they going to make it? How do they make the decisions? What are the kind of weighing factors? A great question to ask. And it doesn't necessarily have to be about your specific business, but something similar. Get them to tell you the story about the last time they made a change. If you're selling to companies and there's multiple people sitting there with you, how did you decide, so maybe I'm doing sales training, conceptual service. I might have them talk about bringing in a lean consultant or changing accounting firms, some other professional service, some other conceptual thing. How did you do it? How long did it take? How did you decide who you were going to pick? You can pull a lot of information from that. Prospects telling that story make it really easy. You see us saying lie a couple times over there. Chicken and egg. Maybe prospects lie to us because we've, as salespeople over the years, lied to them so often, or maybe they started it. Who knows? Who cares? But I think it's a constant. We as prospects try and hold back information in an effort to sort of protect ourselves. So if you can get comfortable both talking about money and asking enough questions and having them tell you the story about the decision-making process, that's going to help a bunch. Once I have that information, then I can finally do my presentation. Maybe a better word to use is just fulfillment. Fulfillment means show them how you're going to fix their problems within their budget and make everybody comfortable. So again, if it's about them, not me, I don't need to tell you all about all the different things that I do. Silly example, but if I've got a closing meeting today and their pain is prospecting, selling at a higher margin, and referrals, I don't need to tell them about the fact that I can help them hire new salespeople with this assessment tool. Shouldn't even be on the radar screen. So the presentation shouldn't be, let me tell you about the history of the company and everything we have ever done. It's just, how do I solve your problems? Finally, if we're lucky enough, post-sell is just cover two things. If you get a new piece of business, do yourself a favor, and in my experience, if you can cover two topics, it's going to help. One is buyer's remorse. Anybody comfortable with that? What's buyer's remorse? Yeah. Buy it and you regret it, or you almost bought it and then afterwards you went, man, I'm glad I didn't do that. That's the emotional buildup. I would submit to you, everything you buy in your life is either fixing a problem, pain, or because you want to, it feels good, pleasure. And sometimes we get ourselves all excited, we go do something or almost do it, and then as the emotion dies down, you think, what did I do that for? Or did I spend too much money? So that's really key. And it's really simple. For me, it's usually I'd shake their hand after we're done. Are you comfortable? Are you sure you want to do this? Did this happen too fast? Something real brief and easy like that. Sort of intellectualize what the emotional exercise we just ran through. Secondly is, again, if you're going to take a policy from one of your competitors and they've been there for 10 years, there's some relationship there. So this may sound uncomfortable, but ask them what they're going to say to their current agent in your situation. So none of my business, but I find that I'm setting you up for a difficult conversation. I'm excited to work with you, but if I was losing you as a customer, I'd call up. I'd ask you questions. I'd try and win you back. So what are you going to say when they call? And literally wait until they tell you that they'll reiterate the pains that they've shared with you. Look, we had that claim problem. You haven't been very attentive. You haven't brought me a new idea in a decade. I'm sorry, you're a really nice guy or a gal, but we've moved it. It's over. Because the post-sell keeps us from having, if you've ever had that 3 o'clock in the morning email where they call you over the weekend and say, you know what, can you not deposit that check? We've changed our minds. One of those two things kicked in, or maybe both. So we want to handle that. So it's quarter till. I want to stop talking if I can and see if there's questions from all of you, because I think we also need some time to network, correct?
Questions?
Yes. Great question. The very simplistic answer is the more emotion I create, the faster it'll happen. But the reality is the bigger the ticket or price point, the more people that are involved from a decision-making standpoint, the more complicated your thing is, the longer it's probably going to take. I think real quick, and we bring 3 things to the table. Time-wise, I was going to skip this, but there's technique, which is some of the stuff I've been talking about, sort of the how-to, what do you say, what do you do. There's behavior, which is just our activity. Make sure you're out there enough, you're in front of people, you're making calls, you're asking for referrals, you're attending these kind of events. And then there's attitude. And if my attitude, this is powerful. If my attitude says it takes me 6 months to get a new piece of business, it'll take me 6 months every time. If my attitude says the price point in my marketplace is $5,000 and I'm charging $6,000 and therefore I'm not going to get business, we're not going to get business, we're going to end up dropping to $5,000. So really powerful what we believe, and usually those beliefs come from years of experience. So you want to make sure that you've got a good opportunity to put those things at bay when you get in situations. That's just a good example of one of them, if that makes sense. Good. Any other questions?
Okay, great.
Thank you.